Flacco throws, that's caught. Moore. For the last few minutes he has had to the 50-yard line. He goes TJ Mosley.
Believe it or not, you can probably function modestly well with just one hemisphere. But when both hemispheres are dysfunctional, usually there's an alteration in consciousness. And so that's the thing about this video that doesn't have me fully convinced as to whether this is a post-concussive seizure or not. Hi, I'm Atom Sarkar. I'm a neurosurgeon and a neuroscientist at Global Neurosciences Institute in Philadelphia. And welcome back to our Global Neurosciences Institute on the web. I think our goal here is to address issues that are happening in the press and popular culture and understand what might be the neuroanatomical basis or the neuroscience substrates to what we're observing. And with regard to popular culture, what's more popular than the NFL? And indeed, the NFL had some things to comment on. So last weekend, it was week 17, and the Jets were playing the Browns. And maybe the most remarkable thing about that game is that the Browns are actually having a winning season. But all kidding aside, it seems as if something happened in the game that's gained a lot of attention, and I think appropriately so, but maybe may not have been explained as correctly and in the nuanced manner in which it deserves. Now, I'm a brain surgeon, and I actually deal with people that have brain problems such as epilepsy, and so I feel I'm really uniquely qualified to comment on this event. The event was the Jets playing the Browns, and this was week 17. This was a Thursday night game, and the halftime is winding down. It's less than 2 minutes, and the Browns wide receiver Elijah Moore catches a ball and sprints off to the left side of the field and gets tackled. And while he comes down with his head planted firmly on the 50-yard line, it's what happens after that that's caused everybody to make comment. What happened after that is actually quite scary. It seemed like that was any other tackle on any other football field, but then it was clear that something was amiss. And the thing that was amiss was that there were convulsive actions that were occurring in Elijah Moore. Now, perhaps initially you could have said what he was doing was moving his arms and shaking, and maybe he was just shaking something off. And it would really be hard to know that unless you were really there on the field and could see. But I think to the best of everyone's suspicion, looking at all the video from afar, is that he had a post-concussive seizure. Now, I'm a seizure surgeon and I deal with epilepsy. Epilepsy is a real problem. It's a scourge. It's something that we've known about almost ever since we've been human, because it's something that you can see. You can tell when somebody's shaking, and you can tell that that's a problem. So we've known about epilepsy for as long as we've had communities. Epilepsy occurs in the United States at about a frequency of 1% in the general population, and globally, it's about that or maybe a little bit less. Epilepsy is very treatable, and there are many, many forms of epilepsy. When you have one shaking event, it's called a seizure. When you have multiple that are not controlled, then you transition into the definition of something called epilepsy or epileptiform disorder. Epilepsy is very treatable, both through medication and now with modern surgery. Now, what happened here? So the brain is wired where you have two sides. There's a right hemisphere and a left hemisphere. And ironically, the left hemisphere controls how my right hand moves, and the right hemisphere controls how my left hand moves. And believe it or not, you can probably function modestly well with just one hemisphere. But when both hemispheres are dysfunctional, usually there's an alteration in consciousness. And so that's the thing about this video that doesn't have me fully convinced as to whether this is a post-concussive seizure or not. His arms are moving, but his legs aren't. And if both of his arms are moving, that means that both hemispheres are somehow dysfunctional. And if that's the case, I wouldn't think that he would be fully conscious. So it would be important for me, if I were on the field as a medical team member, to see if he's able to talk to us, answer questions, know where he is, follow commands, and therefore assess what his level of consciousness is, and if the actions that we're seeing with him shaking his hands have to do with seizures or more have to do with something else that's musculoskeletal and perhaps even neurologic, but not necessarily what we're suspecting is as post-concussive seizure disorder or seizure event in somebody that we're just watching a clip. I think what we know, at least through the popular reports, are that Elijah's doing fine and that he went home the next day after a night of being observed in the hospital, which is certainly very reasonable. Now, does this put him at risk for long-term seizure? That's really hard to know. As a neurosurgeon, we take care of a lot of people that have head injury. We take care of folks that are mostly involved in motor vehicle accidents or other kind of things that are more commonplace. And in those sets of folks, in that population, we know that there's probably about a 25 to 40% chance of long-term seizure or epilepsy occurrence in those traumatic brain injury patients. And for sure, Elijah had a traumatic brain injury. Will he for sure have further problems with seizures? It's hard to say. Will he or should he abstain from playing football? That's probably even harder to say. When should he return to football? That's probably equally an open book question, as we can't take 50 people, create these head injuries, and then take 10 of them and bring them back to play in 1 week, and another 10 bring them back to play in 1 month, and another 10. We can't do these studies because that would be unethical. So I think we just make our best guess judgment. It's likely that he can return to play, but I think the longer that they can refrain from utilizing him in contact sports, whether it's practice or on a Sunday, I think that's up to the team and the trainers, and maybe even ultimately up to the patient. But that's what we know. That's what we saw last Thursday, and that's our breakdown. If you like this, please consider finding us and following us on the web.